All right, folks, I'm leaving the office. I got to get home pretty quick because I have to live stream in less than an hour. Oops. No, there was a team meeting at the end of the day, so it's just on. So I had to stay for that. So I'm hoping there's no traffic. The rain stopped. That's good news. But who knows? What's it say? It's going to take me. It says only 40 minutes, so that could be a good sign, but we'll see. Okay, let me get out of here first before I start blabbing away here. But still in this rental vehicle. This thing sucks. So 2 videos I put out right before this are I explain a little bit, but our SUV is currently in at the shop to get the air conditioner changed. It was on back order, and it only took about 3 months instead of up to 12 like they were saying, so it's good news, but it sucks because I've got to drive this thing. It's just like there's the mirrors, I can't, like, there's so many blind spots in this thing, and there's no backup camera. I don't know, just it's crappy to drive. There's nothing, I don't have GPS or anything, so my phone is down here. Anyway, the video that I made before this one, the vlog entry, I'll briefly just kind of summarize what I talked about there as a bit of a rant, but it kind of is a segue to what I want to talk about here, but a little bit less, hopefully less ranty. There's a little bit of a rant, but we'll see. So the previous video I was talking about how I was trying to share some perspective about how engineer is a professional designation, and there's some complexity involved in that because a lot of companies, like just as an example, if you didn't even realize that it's a professional designation that requires 4 years of 4 years of work experience under professional engineer and ethics tests, and required that you go to an accredited university. If you're like, Nick, I've never heard that, like, that's my point. That's the whole point of what I was trying to get across, is like, it is a professional designation. Now, different places treat it differently, blah, blah, blah. And clearly, like, organizations across the world just don't care that you actually are a professional engineer in software. They just want software developers. So, and I will say one more time, because I said it a bunch in the previous video, but like, I'm personally okay with that. I am not a professional engineer, and I know plenty of people that aren't. Most people I know are not professional engineers, and of those people, I know tons of people that have built awesome software. It's not a requirement to build good software, so don't misunderstand that. Now, what I wanted to talk about in this video is basically how you debate or dispute things, and I want to talk about it in the context of social media because it's absolutely ridiculous and we're really bad at it for the most part. But we need to actually do this kind of thing when we're building software in teams. Like, you need to be able to have discussions where people are disagreeing, and that's okay. You need to be able to move forward from it, like learn from the different perspectives. All of this is an expectation as a software engineer. It's going to happen. You're going to be partnering with other teams that have different priorities. They're going to disagree with you. That's okay. Like, you need to understand they have different priorities. Cool. How are you going to work together? So the framing for this is going to be from 2 different discussions on social media. And then I want to kind of explain why these are. I haven't really figured this out in my head, so it's going to be a bit of a rambling. You shouldn't be surprised by that at this point. But I wanted to talk about how there's these 2 discussions from social media that are sort of like a bad example of how to approach like trying to have a debate that's going to move things forward, and like maybe how to reframe it so that when you're having these discussions with engineering teams, like, they can be effective. So The first one is, of course, the discussion from this morning around like the software engineer title, right? So what a lot of the reason why a lot of comments just kind of like sucked is because like, and it's, I want to talk about this too. It's like it's two-way ownership. So a lot of the comments I felt like were crappy, not because people were like they had a different opinion, but because it wasn't even the point of the discussion, or despite me trying to state that like this is not my personal opinion, this is literally a lived experience, and here's screenshots of these things being defined. People are not focusing on that, right? They kind of read it and then they have an emotional response to it, and the emotional response is that they don't like it. Man, this car is so crappy. I can't see anything when I'm trying to switch lanes on this highway. At least it's not raining now, but man, god awful. I hope the new X1s are nicer. I thought X1 was like my foot's on the ground right now. So yeah, people have these emotional responses to things that they don't like. Of course, right? Like you're reading something, you're like, I disagree with that. But when we have these emotional responses, what ends up happening is like we just don't think about things clearly. So you'll say like, that makes me feel a certain way, I don't like it. And then you focus on what you don't like, and then you start talking about that. So for example, I was saying things like, what is this car, man? It's a Lucid. I'm saying like, hey, my story that I was explaining was like, I personally on my own journey decided to go to university because that's one of the things required to be a professional engineer. I needed to go to an accredited school. And then people are going, well, no, like you don't need like people that don't go to university, that are self-taught and go to boot camp, like they can build software, and like you're not better than other people. Like, okay, man, like no one said that. No one said it. You made it up. And like it misses the point completely. This person behind me doesn't have lights on. Like, the stupidity is like, every time when I'm making these videos, I'm gonna call it out because it's pitch black outside. This person doesn't have lights on. I don't know how stupid you must be to be able to drive like that. It's insane. Okay, so when people are doing this kind of thing, like I said, they're having this emotional response where they're obviously unhappy about something and they're trying to make a point, but the point it's valid, but it's not valid for the context. And in fact, they're starting a debate about something that's not even relevant. So, for example, if they're saying, hey, I disagree, I'm going to change the language a little bit, right? Like, I disagree that you need a university education to develop good software. I've seen plenty of people that have been very successful in going to boot camps or being self-taught or whatever it happens to be. And like, yeah, like I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I've seen that too. So what? Like, that's not what I'm talking. It's just not what I'm talking about. So like, when you have the emotional response, you can't actually focus on the discussion at hand, right? Like, and this, when I'm bringing it back to like software engineering, is like, if you're having a discussion with another team and you're coming up with a proposal, your team is swamped, right? You guys got tons of stuff going on, and that other team's like, look, like we think that things have to go this way. And immediately you're like, man, that's so much more work for us. Like, this is so stupid. We're never going to do that. Like, stop having the emotional response. Like, we have to think about this logically and objectively. I'm never going to be able to switch lanes here because I don't have mirrors that work in this stupid car. So the whole point of this first part is like, we want to remove emotions from having conversations when we're trying to resolve conflicts like this, because the goal is to move forward. Now, next part. Speaking of moving forward, like, when we're having these discussions, like in engineering, what is this person doing? You have your signal on. I left your room. When we're having these discussions in engineering teams, we are trying to solve a problem or problems, right? There's something we got to get done. In the social media example, people very often, this is like one of the most common things you'll see when people are like have banter on social media. It's purely about trying to prove someone wrong while you're proving yourself right. And the reason why this is so crappy is because, like, no one wins. No one wins. If someone has a different paradigm, a completely different worldview from you, and you try to debate them, you're just absolutely wasting your time and their time, especially like on social media, right? Like, it's just a complete waste. What you're expecting that this person's going to crash. They slammed on their brakes like a big idiot. At least they got their lights on. On social media, you're wasting so much time because in a couple of comments, you're going to change this person's. Look at this person passing me. Can you see that out the window? I don't know. It's my foot down. This thing is so slow and crappy. You're not going to change someone's philosophy, their entire worldview, in a comment thread where you're blasting each other. Like, it's just never going to happen. So, am I allowed to drive this thing in the fast lane? Whatever, I'll do it. I don't care. I'll tell them. It's a rental, right? Or what do they call it? A courtesy vehicle? So in social media, when we do this, you're basically setting yourself up to waste time. But it's no different if you're doing this in your engineering discussions. It just seems like much more obvious on social media, right? Because you're like, this person's trolling me, they're saying mean stuff, and obviously they're a dummy, so I'm going to troll them back, and like, I'm right, they're wrong. The example I gave this morning was when someone was trying to tell me that like regulated, having regulations for something, they're like, that's just people trying to extort you. I told them, like, I can know, and I literally said in the comment, I said, hey, I'm not trying to be rude about this, but like, I can no longer have can't debate you on this anymore because like we fundamentally have a different perspective on this, and just like very respectfully, if we can't agree on this part or move past it, like nothing else is going to be valuable. It's just not, it's going to be a waste of time, right? I fundamentally don't think that there's just like malicious organizations that are putting, regulations on engineering to extort people. And if I have to try having a debate about topics, and that's all that someone else is going to focus on, like that's every argument comes back to that. Like, it's not going to go anywhere. So that's okay. Like, they're absolutely allowed to believe that. That's their belief. That's cool. I can't have a positive conversation with them that's going to move anything forward, because any fact I try to put in front of them, I could have pictures, I could have documentation. They will try to bring it back to this paradigm that they don't believe in. So when we're having discussions about designs and software engineering, it's not about just trying to prove other people wrong. Like, That's not the goal. Your goal is to try making sure that you can get a solution to a problem. That's the goal. How you do that can start to look very different. But the goal is not to prove other people wrong. I just realized how dark it is in here, and I don't even know if you can see me as I'm talking. It's amazing. We'll find out, I guess. So instead of just trying to prove people wrong, it's very interesting. I'm going to go back to the social media part after this, but instead of trying to prove people wrong, so you're trying to come up with a design, trying to solve a problem involving other teams, and you don't agree with what they're saying. Like, they're like, we want this technology. And you're like, that's obviously super dumb. Why would we do that? You guys don't know anything. Instead of going that route, seek to understand. Like, try to assume that people, I know I'm a hypocrite for calling all these people with their lights off dumb while they're driving at night. So sorry for being a hypocrite when I go to say this, but try to understand why they have their belief system. If you're working with an engineering team and they're like, no, like, we think this technology is the way to go, you completely disagree with it, but why? Why do they think it's the best way to go? Right? I can't remember where I said this. Must have been on one of these rambling rants, but it must have been from earlier today. I was talking about database technology, okay? So some other teams like, no, we want this database tech, it's the best, it's the fastest. And you're like, obviously not. Like, we use this other database tech, it is so much faster, it's so much better. But then you realize, like, they're talking about how they've built awesome systems optimized for writing, and you've built optimized systems for reading data, just as a dumb example, right? So if you don't take the opportunity to understand the perspective of the other side, you're just missing out on information. So in that silly example, right, I know it's contrived, you might be able to say, hey, look, wait, okay, like, we need this part of the system is very write heavy. Like, what if, to optimize this, what if we picked a database that could optimize for the writes there? We don't like that database because we never use it, but maybe that makes a lot of sense in that context. But this other part of the system, like, we're basically just dealing with cold data. It's not changed. And we actually have this opportunity in between to process the data. So maybe we literally have a hot path we're writing to, and then we can move the data to this other spot once it's been processed. And we have this, like, super optimized read path. Now, I'm just making stuff up, obviously, but the point of this is to say, like, I just gave you an example of trying to pick technologies from two different teams based on what they were trying to optimize for. So it's hard to do because, again, going back to the first point, we often get emotional. We're like, I don't like that. I'm not comfortable with it. And then we focus on the wrong things. But if you can really try when you're like, if you're noticing that you're getting frustrated with someone, you're like, how could they possibly think that? You can ask them, like, why do you think that? And genuinely be curious, because if you say, why do you think that, and making them feel like an idiot, like driving with your lights off, then they're not going to be very responsive. So if you try to do that, I think that ultimately you end up learning more. If they do the same to you, you'll learn more, and you'll ultimately come up with a better solution. Now, bring it back to social media. Not every interaction has been a stupid, crappy one. And I think that there are plenty of opportunities to have really cool disagreements or questioning where you're learning from it. And this is one of my favorite parts about social media because unfortunately it's rare, but it's super cool because there are people that you don't interact with every day. It could be from any part of the world. And now you get to learn from each other. So on this engineering thread that I was talking about, there was a woman that was talking about something, and she's a doctor. I mentioned earlier that people were doing a lot of comparisons with doctors. And she was offering some perspective and saying, she's using like doctor examples and different fields, and then she said that I'm gonna get this wrong, so I apologize, but something along the lines of like engineering is not a specific profession. And when I read it, I'm like, everything else she said seemed like it was in agreement with the things I was saying, but what does she mean? It's like not a specific profession, because I'm like, you can literally be a professional engineer. What's up with that? Right? Like, what does she mean? So what I did was I said, hey, thanks for like sharing. Let's like helpful information. And then I said I was curious about what you meant by this part specifically, and you know, I even made the statement. I think it's probably just a terminology thing that I might be misunderstanding. So like, could you just elaborate on this part further? And then I thanked her again for actually participating. So I tried to take two opportunities to say like, I am not here to crap on you for commenting when I might potentially disagree with what you're about to say. But instead, I was just trying to be curious about it. And then she came back and responded, and she gave me some really good examples. She was explaining how like we talk about professional engineer, but like an engineer of what? Because like a chemical engineer versus a mechanical engineer versus a civil engineer versus software engineer, like that's where the specificity comes in. That's what she was trying to get across in her point. So like again, you can have these interactions where they are enlightening, and I love that about social media. So I've seen a couple of, and I can't remember off the top of my head because I'm driving this stupid X1 and I can't scroll through my phone, but I've definitely had some good examples where when people are trolling, because it happens all the time as a content creator, everyone loves to just like say whatever stupid thing they want to say. But there have been times where I take a deep breath, and instead of just like instead of just being like, "Oh, this is a dumb troll, here we go," there was something on like Blue Sky or Threads in the past few weeks where someone said something, and I think they were saying something like, "Hey, like no, like." What did they say? Like, that's not how employers treat us or whatever. Like, that's such a dumb perspective. Like no managers looking out for their employees. Something along the lines of this. And I was just like, hey, like, the beginning of the conversation was like, no, I disagree with that. And once they were feeding into it, I was like, I'm done with this. Like, I'm not going to try and convince them. But instead I changed it around and I just said like, hey, like it actually, I think it was something along the lines like, to me, it sounds like you've had a lived experience where like this was like, has really negatively impacted you. And that's like affected your perspective like on this. And I just said like, did something like that happen that you like, can you like offer more detail on that? And literally, they completely changed around the conversation, so they were no longer defensive about it, shared some extra perspective, and then by the end of the thread, like in our comment exchange, I was like, yeah, I think we probably, like, I see their perspective and why that would be frustrating, and I think they got mine. And I was like, yeah, it feels good. So, like, there's absolutely ways to have disagreements with people. And like, you don't have to agree with, man, these people driving today, just nuts. This guy's tailgating someone in this one lane fast lane. It's not going to work, buddy. You can have disagreements with people, and you don't have to agree with everything that people say. And this is important, again, in your software engineering, because there's going to be stuff where you're like, that's not the database tech that I want to use. Or that's not going to, like, that doesn't align with the work stream that I'm focused on. But sometimes we have to take a step back and say, like, is this, like, do I understand that this is actually a better fit for the business objectives? And that's a hard thing to do sometimes, because it's like you're having this internal struggle where you're like, that's going to slow us down, or that's going to do this or that. And sometimes you have to look at it and say, like, is this actually a better thing, like, overall? And it's hard. But I think there's a lot that can be learned from just, like, trying to, I shouldn't say trying to be in conflict. When you find yourself in conflicts and debates and stuff, we get very offensive. That's the wrong way to put it. We get defensive about our position, but we go on the offense. That's what I mean to say. We go on the offense to, like, to cut people down on this stuff. And there's a really interesting opportunity that you can practice even on social media. So if you're like, man, like, Nick talks about soft skills and stuff a lot, but, like, screw that. Like, I don't got time for that. Like, you can just do this on social media. Like, the next time that you're disagreeing with someone, and, like, you know it's going to turn into like a flame war where you're just, like, blasting each other with how much you hate the other person's perspective, just take the opportunity to try and learn what their perspective is. Like, and you can repeat this a million times, right? Because it's the internet. Like, who cares? So you can take this opportunity to try and say, like, okay, here's someone I don't agree with. Okay? And instead of me being like, hey, I think you're stupid for thinking that, instead, you could ask them, like, hey, why is it that you think that? Like, what are the things about this thing that you love that I can learn from you, like, in your perspective? So, for example, I'm just going to make something up, because this happens a lot with programming language where someone's like, oh, like, I don't know, like, PHP is the best programming language. And my gut reaction is like, absolutely no, it's not. And I'm so sorry that your brain is broken if you think that. But, like, that's not right, obviously. I don't like PHP. I think it's gross. But instead of just, like, typing that to someone and being like, oh, you must be stupid for liking PHP, instead, like, well, hey, what is it you like about PHP? Like, honestly, like, what is it? And then instead of, like, making fun of them for giving answers, you actually listen to what they have to say. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but they might say, like, and I don't know anything about PHP, so it's not even fair for me to say, but they might say, like, hey, like, I like the tooling for it, or I like the community, or I like that it's been around for a long time and it's tried and tested. I like the environments I can use it in. Like, cool. Interesting perspective, right? You don't have to agree with it. Amazing concept. You might be like, yeah, like, I don't see it that way. That's cool. Like, great. Someone just shared their perspective with you, gave you information, new perspective on it. Awesome. Like, you can actually successfully leave it there, and everyone will be, maybe not, I don't know, happy is a bit of a stretch, but but at least not mad at each other. So you can do this with tech stacks. You can do this with anything you want to debate where people are going to have a different opinion, but you can take the opportunity to learn from people. And that's a really cool thing about social media. So at the end of the day, just to kind of close off on the software engineering part, it's without a doubt going to be something where you have to practice being able to have healthy conflict, whether it's within your team, right? You're working with other people on it. It's a pull request or something, and people have different opinions about design patterns and whatever to use. That might be something that comes up. I think the more common one, like, long term, is going to be where it's really challenging is working with other teams. Oh, this guy on a bike, man. This X1 doesn't even go faster than that bike. When you're working across other teams, I think the bigger situation is going to be when you have these disagreements, and it's because you have different priorities, you value different things on your teams, you have different experiences, all totally legitimate. And it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. What matters is that you work towards a solution, because guess what? That's what you're getting paid for. So that's going to wrap that up. How am I doing for time? Hey, man, I've been flying here. 6:30. I'm going to make it for my live stream. Not even going to be late, which is cool. which is cool. Maybe I'll even have time to eat. Maybe. That would be cool too. Ugh. But yeah, I think workload for me lightens up a little bit as of like tomorrow night or Wednesday. I get through a lot of performance review stuff that's finally wrapping up. I don't say finally as in like I didn't like it. I've been trying to be transparent about this. Like, I think performance review conversations and stuff are like, and career conversations are the most important part of my job. But it's a lot of peopling, and I'm introverted, so I feel the energy dip when I have to do a lot of this. So that's what I mean when I say like finally done. So that'll wrap up very soon. And then I have a course with Ryan Murphy. We are so close to doing our second course together. It's almost done. So I'm going to try to wrap that up tonight, I'm hoping. Get that over to the editor. And then it's just double checking everything, making sure it's all good to go. That's cool. I am going to have, I talked to my editor about this, so I'm going to wrap up the last couple minutes of this drive with a note on this, but because I don't know if I talked about it. I have yet another vlog channel, and I've been doing it for like 80 weeks or something now, probably more. And I every week I just make a vlog entry for like when I started content creation. And if you want to see that, it's actually linked in the description and stuff of these videos. It's just called Dev Leader Behind the Screen. So I think it's Dev Leader BTS on YouTube. So YouTube has been challenging for me recently because over the past few weeks, like when I went to Hawaii, that's the first time in my channel's history that the channel's growing, but it's no longer accelerating. In fact, it's decelerating in terms of growth, which is not a good sign because, as you would hope, as a channel is growing, it starts to gain momentum and kind of have a snowball effect. And that has been happening, except in hindsight, I don't know if the snowball's actually been growing. I think it's just been a snowball kind of the same size for a while. So now the snowball's actually shrinking. So it's still kind of going along, but it's no longer growing in size as it's going. So the number of subscribers I'm getting in my channel is going up. But sorry, how do I phrase this? Number of total subscribers is going up, but the number of subscribers I get per month. What happened here? I dropped my mic. No! It's so dark in here. You probably can't hear anything I'm saying. Anyway, I'll talk really loud because I don't know if you can hear anything I'm saying. But he's going to do my thumbnails for me. Where did this thing go? I don't know. Anyway, bye.